The following program is paid for and sponsored by Life Extension Foundation.
With us now is Richard Bernstein. A pleasure to finally have you on the show, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you, and pleasure for being on your show.
Thank you, sir. So, you're in the healthcare business, insurance and so forth, and that's been so much in the news in the last years. What are your thoughts with regard to where we are in the insurance world right now?
The Obamacare issue is a very significant issue in the United States. Obama said everybody should have health care. But what good is the health care if they can't get their doctor or the drugs they need? Because what happens is they put it on the tombstone with a flag saying they had Obamacare, but it didn't work. The other problem with Obamacare is they have, if you're young and you're supposed to be in the plan, the fine that you have is here, the cost of health care is here. So what happens with that fine, that money goes into the government. No one knows where that money goes. It doesn't go to reduce the cost of health care. And that's a serious problem. In fact, the government might not even get any money. What might happen is when they file the income tax, it comes off the income tax. So who knows where that money goes? You know, we have a $20 billion deficit. Who knows where that money goes? So the cost of health care is going up. They had three good parts of the health care bill. One, if you're age 26, your kids are covered under your plan. Pre-existing conditions, covered. No limit on the amount of money you can get. Here's the problem though with the pre-existing condition. They should have only had a 2-year ability to get under the plan for pre-existing condition. Remember I said that the fine is here and the cost is here. So whoever didn't get under the plan, if they get sick, next year when they have open enrollment, they go under the plan and their pre-existing condition is covered. All the illegals coming into this country, people with these other diseases that we took care of many years ago, come under the same plan that we're under, the employer and the employees. So who's paying for the cost, for their cost? The employees of this country and the employer. What happens when the rates come in and the employer gets a higher rate? A lot of that's passed on to the employees. The employees in this country can't afford it. You know, if Trump gets in, I think he's going to reduce the health care by a minimum 25%. That's a big savings. That will be a big number, and it will be right to the bottom line to the employer and to the employees of this country. And Bill Clinton said, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." That was his comment about Obamacare. And his wife in 1992 was one of the first to try to put it into effect. You know, he got taped, he got quoted, and if you talk to anybody in the United States that is an employee, you will probably find out that the second largest cost besides the employees getting paid is healthcare. I gave a talk recently at FIU, and my talk was, how do you link wealth to health? And what I meant by that is when I was a kid, we were told if you put away money for retirement, you'll have this much money. I'm telling everybody you better put away enough money to have enough money to pay for your healthcare bills. Because if you don't, you might die without getting the proper health care because the cost is so unbelievable. When I first came into the insurance business, you bought a $10,000 major medical policy, lifetime, with a $500 deductible. Today, the average cost to go into the hospital is $10,000 a day, depending upon what hospital you go into. It's just unbelievable. So a lot of people in this country are worried about, does it cover my prescriptions? Does it cover my drugs? Does it cover my doctors? That's important, but the most important thing is God forbid you have a major illness. You get really sick. You got to have insurance to cover that because it's not about $500 or $1,000. It's about $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. My son got married to this lady from Honduras, and he adopted her son. And he had cerebral palsy. And there's a gentleman here in Palm Beach County, he's the foremost expert in the world on how to fix cerebral palsy. He's a former architect. And what he does with these kids that come all over the world is he breaks the bones in their leg and puts a bar, like an architectural, like you would do for a building. And the cost for my grandson was $2.7 million over a 2-year period to cover his sickness. Between the hospital, between the doctors, between the therapy, you have 3 operations. It's just, and if you don't have health care in this country, the average person can't afford it. They'll go bankrupt. And that's the biggest bankruptcy in our country today is on health care. They don't have the money to pay. They don't have the money to pay the bill.
These are exactly the points made by William Falloon and Life Extension Foundation. Our main sponsor, in fact, he wrote a book called Pharmocracy. I need to get you a copy, arguing correctly that the costs associated with healthcare are incredibly questionable and corrupt and excessive.
Yeah, because what happens, you have the hospital, you have the doctor, you have the drug companies. Now you have other companies that come in and give you, like, the metal that goes into your leg, into your arm. They all charge, all on top of each other. And since Obamacare went into effect, the cost of Obamacare, not the cost of the old insurance, has gone up over 100%. And the problem is that the numbers that are come out, the drug companies in the last 5 years have really, really raised their rates unmerciful. And I think, this is just my opinion now, is that the government should have a favorable clause that says that what any other country buys the drugs for, we buy them for the same price. Because what we're doing is we're funding the entire world on healthcare. We're funding the entire world for drugs. And it shouldn't be the United States' problem to take care of France and Britain and Canada. Why should we pay a higher cost? Why should our employees have to pay a higher cost? Why should the employer have to pay a higher cost? Why should anybody have to pay a higher cost? It's not appropriate. And that's what we have to do. That's what the government has to do to make sure that the cost of health care is affordable. Just to be able to get the health care doesn't make it affordable. If it's not affordable, it doesn't work. And that's a serious problem for employees in this country and for the employer, because the employer is used to paying it. I believe that what the government would like to have is the employer not pay for the insurance, have the employees pay for it, like you do your casualty insurance. And the reason I believe that to be true is that's a deductible item to the corporations, group insurance, group health. If it's an individual, if it's not 10% of your income, it's not deductible. So now you would take that kind of money, and the government doesn't get any deductions, the corporations would pay a higher tax. And by the way, if you give that money to your employees and don't buy insurance, but you give them the cash to buy their own policy, it's considered income to them. They have to pay income tax on that dollar. And if they buy their own health care, that means they're getting less than 70 cents on a dollar to buy health care for themselves. It's a real serious problem. And also the government controls 1/6, that's 1/6 of every dollar is health care in this country. They want to control that. They really want a one-payer system. I mean, the Democrats want the one-payer system. And the problem with the one-payer system, the reason it doesn't work, you have no checks and balances. You have no idea what the real costs are. You have nothing to compare it against. When you have competition between companies, you know the cost. And as you can see, in most of the states now, these major companies are pulling out of the healthcare system because it's too expensive. And President Obama promised them that they would get reimbursed if they overpaid, but it wasn't in the bill. They reneged in putting it in the bill. But he said to the insurance industry, look, you sue us, we'll look the other way. We won't have our people, prosecute. We won't put up a big fight, and you'll get paid. Most insurance companies, they're out. They can't afford it. And let's be honest, insurance companies aren't in business to lose money. They're not a government. They're in private practice. On the other hand, they're there to give good coverage. So between what's happening in that area and the fraud that's going on the drugs and the pills and the stuff, it's really a serious problem. And if you look at the Obamacare bill, 2,000 pages. The 3 things we talked about: unlimited protection, kids covered up to age 26, pre-existing's covered, After that, you can throw everything out of that bill. You have all hidden taxes inside that bill. Where does that money go? It's not going to reduce health care. President Obama said, if you buy a plan, you can keep your plan. It's going to be a reduction in cost. You can keep your plan, it would be $250 deduction. So far, it's been a $2,500 increase for an average person. It's a huge, huge problem. And if we don't get our hands around it, the average person won't have any money. They can't save money.
But now, with the Donald Trump administration, how do you see the future?
I think Donald Trump will help reduce healthcare costs. I think he'll put a plan in that can be bought in any state without having to cross state lines. Right now, when you buy a healthcare policy, you have to put a zip code, and they charge you by the zip code. If you live in, example, Chicago, or you live in New Jersey, or you live in Florida, depending upon the zip code. So if you go into the major cities, their costs are higher because their hospital costs are higher, their doctors' costs are higher, their drugs cost are higher. So if you can put a level playing program across the country and charge a certain fee, no matter what area you're in, and then if you want to buy anything on top of that, if you want to buy extra coverage, well, then you should pay extra for it. But they should be able to put a basic plan into this country that everybody can enjoy and everybody can use. And on the other hand, if you have these illegals coming in, no disrespect to the word I'm using, undocumented illegals, there should be another fund over here that they go into that fund, not into this fund, so they don't corrupt this fund. And then we have to figure out how to pay for that fund if it's our responsibility. But they should not be in the same fund that the employees and the employers in this country have been there for years trying to get good coverage and keep their costs down, because it drives the rates up. And there should be a limitation, like I say, on a pre-existing condition. And the drug companies should be working with the government, with the hospitals, with the people to make sure that people can afford the drugs that they need to survive. Because having a plan and not affording the doctor or the hospital, it's really a serious problem.
These are all crucial subjects. I'd like us to continue, but we must pause for these commercial messages. We'll be right back.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and has grown to become the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 compared with how people die today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. Log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
Anywhere else, this would be a vacation on the Mediterranean. But here, it's also a journey into history. From modern Tel Aviv to the ancient cities of Herod, the Romans, the Crusaders. The history of Israel lives in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful. A miracle. Oh, it was beautiful, magical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable. Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
We're back with Richard Bernstein and joined by Doug Gass. Doug, good to have you join us.
Nice to be here.
I'd like to pick up where we left off discussing healthcare and how you see the future with healthcare.
During the break, Doug and I were talking about holistic treatment and how that could reduce the cost, especially on cancer patients. The problem that I see in this country is that when someone gets really sick, they don't know where to go. They'll call their friend, they'll call their doctor, they get referred, and it's a very expensive process, costs a lot of money, and a lot of people die. The question is where to go to find information. What can we do to reduce cost in this country?
And what are your thoughts on that, Doug?
Well, there's a recent statistic that I heard that was very alarming. They said that 1 out of every 2 people is going to get cancer or be treated for cancer over the next 5 years. That's unbelievable. So I think if we take a more holistic approach and we look at some of the treatments that are out there, and the stuff that Bill Falloon talks about all the time with Life Extension Foundation, where he talks about natural cures for every disease that's out there. And the problem is that the drug companies don't make any money off of those. So that's why we don't hear about those cures. But they're all over the world. There's a video that's just come out by Ty Bollinger, and he talks about cancer and all the treatments that are in Tijuana and the ones that are over in Eastern Europe. And it's fascinating just to listen to it. But what you're talking about, let that information get out there so people can hear it and make their own decisions. And the other thing that shocked me is in this country, we actually mandate that a child has to have chemotherapy, that we take the child away from their parents and we force them to have chemotherapy treatment. And chemotherapy is poison, and radiation is also something that we know causes cancer. So maybe we should rethink this a little bit.
Well, you know, you brought up a good point. And the trouble is that it seems under our healthcare program, we're going in this direction, very narrow direction. And what you're talking about is a broad direction, at looking at everything possible, getting the drug companies and getting the people who monitor the drugs to understand what the real serious problem is. And it should be brought out to the public, and it should be discussed, and there should be options. You know, it's like when you go to buy a piece of property, or you go to do something, you have an option. The cost is X, this is what I get. And the same thing should be in healthcare. It should be made simple for the person that when they get sick, their family, friends can help them get to the right people to make a decision. Do I go this way, or do I go this way? Or do I do a combination of both? But people don't know. And holistic things in the past have been brought out that that's terrible. That's not the right thing. You die from it. You know what I'm saying?
That has been the consensus, which is wrong.
Right. So people should be given an option. Options in life are very important in this healthcare, and it could reduce the cost of healthcare. You know, and the cost. What I don't understand is you see a lot of the hospitals say they're losing money, but next week they have a bigger wing, and they have more beds, and they have more people, and you know, I'm not sure they're losing money. It's depending on how you do the accounting on really who's losing money. And the problem is that people who need it the most are the ones that don't get it. They're the ones that die and not treated, and their family members accept it because that's how society told you to accept it.
But there are some options and alternative research that is bringing the promise of some incredible new future. One of the options that are out there is what Doug is involved with, which is the Age Reversal Therapeutics Incorporated. Tell us a little bit about that, please, Doug.
This is a company that was created by Life Extension Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that gives away about $10 million a year to different projects to either reverse aging or to create more wellness in the world. And what we've done is we've created a for-profit company, and the idea is to raise money to put into research for scientists and for doctors that are currently on the cutting edge of being able to either reverse aging or turn back immune issues. Because if we can increase our immune system so that it can combat all kinds of ailments that are out there, cancer and diabetes, and you just name it, almost every disease can go back to an immune deficiency in some way, shape, or form. And the interesting thing is, when you hit about age 65, your immune system falls off a cliff. And all of a sudden, it can't fight anything, and it gets worse and worse and worse over the years. So if we can reverse that trend on the subject that we're talking about, can you imagine what would happen with healthcare? The cost of healthcare would go through the floor. There would be a fraction of what it is today, because that's what people die of. That's why people get sick, because their immune system no longer operates.
That's why the stem cells now are becoming a big situation, because it has to do with the immune system. And you're right. I've been reading about it. I've been studying about it, because in our office, I help pay the claims. I try to make sure that anybody who has a claim, they get paid, that the doctor pays, the hospital pays, and make sure that they don't get not to pay. And in looking at the stem cells, I mean, we didn't come out with it until about 8 years ago, and it's now becoming a big thing in this country. And it's all about the immune system. I talked to the doctor who runs Sloan Kettering and the Cancer Institute in Texas, and they tell me that a person being born today, the average life expectancy is between 100 and 150.
That's right.
So when you say about the immune system, there's things that we could even do in our diet that we should be doing to make sure that we don't have a problem with our immune system.
Well, also, if you look at oncologists, okay, they have no training whatsoever in nutrition or in holistic treatments, nothing. So what they do is they just either are using chemotherapy or they're using radiation and drugs. That is it. And if you come to them and you say that you have something else that you'd like to look into, you know, they'll literally sometimes throw you out of their office, because they're so ingrained in what they've been taught, and they've been taught nothing else. And that's a real problem too. The educational system for doctors in this country all leads to what? Drug development.
The person comes off the street and says, I have a new drug I want you to try. They don't always know about pharmaceutical background, because a lot of the doctors haven't had a pharmaceutical background. If you check out most doctors, you'll see that they haven't had pharmaceutical training.
Right.
The few that have understand about certain kind of drugs and other. And also, when you have a generic drug in this country, it's supposed to be as good as the regular drug, but it's not. The generic drug is a minimum off of 20%. And depending upon what you take the drug for, if you take a generic drug, it might not work like the regular drug. I'm not saying that all, but I'm saying some. And you have to take a look at it very carefully and know which drug is the right drug to use.
Some physicians are prosecuted. What I'm referring to actually is the right to try. There's controversy with regard to physicians who would like perhaps to try alternative treatments. There is some legislation here and there with regard to the right to try. What are your views on that?
I agree with you. I mean, the trouble is, it's like what Ben Carson talked about under the First Amendment, we've lost our First Amendment rights. And the doctor is there to try to help you, to cure you. You know, he doesn't have all the answers, or she doesn't have all the answers, but they might have an idea that could help you. In some of these trials that people go in on these new drugs out there, these new pills, that's why they try it out, because they're trying to save people's lives. They're not trying to hurt people. So doctors should be given the ability to make a decision into what's the best interest of the patient.
Again, I must apologize to our audience. We are here at the Breakers Hotel in a corridor. People are talking in the background, and there's construction outside. So I hope you can focus on the subject matter. Doug, what would you like to add to that?
Just to go back to what you were talking about, Richard, about age reversal therapeutics, the idea is that if we can just turn the immune system back on, or we can do some gene therapy, which allows genes to be activated that are activated when we're young and keep us healthy. As we get older, we can activate those genes through different. I've talked to so many PhDs, scientists, doctors that are out there with these new concepts and cures that think they can actually reverse aging. So, and some of them think we will be able to live forever. So, but let's just say we can live another 100 years or so. The world will change completely.
Even 10 years.
Even 10 years.
Everybody,
right.
Tell
Sure.
someone who's going to give them a 10-year life that they love it. They want to see their grandchildren. Right. They like to see the kids get married. They like to, just give them 10 years.
We have one group that we're looking to finance. His name is Dr. Greg Fahey, and what he's working on is he's been able to regrow his own thymus gland, which is very instrumental in immune issues. And so he has come up with a protocol to be able to regrow his own thymus. And we have pictures where he's actually been able to do that. He's in his late 60s now. And your thymus gland basically disappears by the time you're about 50. So it's quite extraordinary what he's done. And that's going to be able to refurbish his immune system, which is then going to be able to. So can you imagine if we could do that on a large scale? And it's not an amazing, it's just a cocktail of drugs that are already on the market. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. We're looking at another one called GDF11, which is another way, it's a protein, and what it does, it allows your cells to regenerate. And they've shown this through a lot of different biomarkers that people are actually getting younger. It's a very small group right now. So what do we need for all this? We need funding. The government could fund all this research instantly.
Or you could be part of the healthcare system, and it could be funded that way too. In other words, besides the government funding you, what you have to do is the government say this is an alternative. If the government says it's an alternative, and then the insurance industry accepts it, you come under their program. So people who would go to you, they would pay you while they're being treated.
Yeah.
So it's really a two-way system. It's the government, the insurance industry, and the doctors agreeing that this is an alternative way of saving lives and protecting people.
But as a country, we put hundreds of billions of dollars into everything, right? But we don't put it into cancer research. We don't put it into what I'm talking about, age reversal research. There is no money from the government going into a very small amount into age reversal or anything that has to do with improving your immune system. So why don't we be intelligent and go down those roads? I don't know what Mr. Trump's views are on this, because I don't think I've heard that, but it would be great to have him become educated with this and see if he can create an agenda to move forward, because I think Ben Carson would be interested in this.
Yeah, Ben's great. You know, Mr. Trump's great too, because his goal is to reduce the cost of health care. That was one of his promises, and get rid of it.
And what you're discussing here, both of you, is in that direction. So we should try and make that happen.
We just can't stay on the path that we're on, because the path that we're on, it breaks the bank. We got to reduce the cost. We have to put innovative ideas in there. We have to come up with things that will make people live longer, and that will cut out certain diseases. And we have to work on it on a very heavily basis, and we have to work on it together. We got to get Congress, we got to get the president, we got to get the doctors, we got to get the hospitals, we got to get this gentleman right over here, and we all got to put our heads together and make it work, and work in one line, and not fight each other. Because it's not about money now, it's about saving people's lives and taking care of the diseases. Because the worst thing that happens is when someone gets sick, a loved one in your family, it's very upsetting. It's very hard to deal with.
Absolutely. But there are very good reasons for us to hope for the implementation of great progress ahead. Science, wisdom, technology, all of these combined, and goodwill can bring some wonderful solutions for all of us.
It's true.
On that happy thought, I'd like to thank you for being with us today, and we should meet again soon and see what happens in the future.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Pleasure to be on your program.